I stared across the polished mahogany table at Jonathan Hartwell, CEO of our biggest client, as I finished presenting the quarterly results that would secure another year of our $480 million partnership. 6 years of relationship building, countless late nights, and unwavering dedication had led to this moment. Then Bradley walked in. Our new VP cleared his throat loudly, interrupting my conclusion about next quarter's expansion opportunities. "Sorry I'm late," he announced, not sounding sorry at all. "But don't worry, Jonathan. We can handle the real business now that the support staff has finished her little presentation." The silence that followed Bradley's words felt like a physical blow to my chest. Support staff. Port. After everything I had accomplished after building this relationship from a $50 million account into the cornerstone of our agency's success, he had just reduced me to nothing more than an assistant in front of the most important client in our portfolio. My name is Anna Lee, and I had spent the last 6 years of my life transforming myself from a junior associate fresh out of the University of Texas into the senior account director who personally managed our most valuable partnerships. When I first joined Meridian Marketing, the Hartwell Industries account was struggling, hemorrhaging money, and on the verge of walking away. Patricia, our previous VP and my mentor, had given me one shot to turn things around. I remembered those early days vividly, working 70-hour weeks learning every detail of industrial logistics, understanding the complexities of Hartwell's supply chain management needs. I missed Emma's school plays, skipped family dinners, and spent weekends researching market trends just to prove that our small agency could compete with the multinational firms vying for Hartwell's business. The transformation had been remarkable. Through careful analysis of their operational challenges and innovative marketing strategies that highlighted their efficiency improvements, we had helped Hartwell Industries expand from a regional player into a national powerhouse. The account had grown nearly tenfold under my direct management, and Jonathan Hartwell had become more than just a client. He was someone who trusted my expertise implicitly. But Patricia had retired 3 months ago, and Meridian's CEO David Richardson had brought in Bradley from outside the company to fill her position. Bradley came with an impressive resume from a larger firm in Chicago, but he had never worked directly with any of our existing clients. He had never spent sleepless nights worrying about campaign deadlines or celebrated small victories that built into major successes. As I sat in that boardroom watching Jonathan's uncomfortable expression and feeling the eyes of my colleagues burning into the back of my neck, the full weight of my situation became clear. Bradley wasn't just undermining me professionally. He was systematically dismantling everything I had worked to achieve. "Actually," Jonathan said slowly, his voice cutting through the tension, "Anna Lee has been instrumental in our growth over the past several years. I was hoping to discuss some expansion opportunities that she and I have been developing." Bradley's smile never wavered, but I caught the flash of irritation in his eyes. "Of course, Jonathan. But moving forward, you'll be working directly with me on all strategic decisions. Anna Lee will continue handling the day-to-day administrative tasks she's been managing." Administrative tasks. My throat tightened as I realized what was happening. This wasn't just a misunderstanding or poor communication. Bradley was deliberately repositioning me as subordinate support staff, erasing years of relationship building and expertise development in a single meeting. After the meeting ended with awkward handshakes and promises of follow-up calls, I remained seated as everyone else filed out. My hands trembled slightly as I gathered my presentation materials, each page representing hours of careful analysis and strategic planning. The quarterly report I had just presented showed record-breaking results, innovative campaign performance metrics, and detailed projections for continued growth, but none of that mattered now. In less than 10 minutes, Bradley had managed to undermine my credibility and reduce my professional standing to that of an entry-level employee. As I walked back to my office, I could feel the sympathetic glances from colleagues who had witnessed the entire exchange. Their expressions told me everything I needed to know about how badly the situation had unfolded. The worst part was the betrayal I felt toward the company I had given everything to support. Meridian Marketing had been my professional home, the place where I had grown from an uncertain graduate into a confident industry expert. Patricia had mentored me, encouraging my development and recognizing my contributions. Under her leadership, I had felt valued and appreciated for the specialized skills I brought to our client relationships. Now, sitting alone in my office surrounded by awards and recognition plaques that suddenly felt meaningless, I realized that my position at Meridian had become untenable. Bradley had made his intentions clear. He wanted me gone, or at least marginalized to the point where my expertise would no longer threaten his authority. That evening, I drove home to my small apartment where my 8-year-old daughter Emma was waiting with her homework spread across our kitchen table. As a single mother, I had always been proud of providing stability and security for both of us. My success at Meridian had allowed me to give Emma opportunities I never had growing up, including enrollment in a private school with excellent academic programs. But as I helped Emma with her math problems, I couldn't stop thinking about the implications of what had happened. If Bradley succeeded in forcing me out or demoting me significantly, I would lose the financial security that supported our comfortable lifestyle. Even more importantly, I would lose the professional identity that I had worked so hard to establish. Later that night, after Emma had gone to bed, I sat at my computer researching Bradley's background. What I discovered made my blood run cold. At his previous company in Chicago, he had been involved in a restructuring that resulted in the termination of 3 senior female employees. According to industry publications, there had been allegations of discriminatory behavior, though nothing had been proven in court. The pattern was becoming clear. Bradley's comment about support staff hadn't been an innocent mistake or poor word choice. It had been a calculated move designed to undermine my credibility and begin the process of pushing me out of my position. And if his track record was any indication, he wouldn't stop until he had complete control over all client relationships. As I finally crawled into bed well past midnight, one thought kept echoing in my mind. I had spent 6 years building something meaningful and valuable both for myself and for Meridian Marketing. I wasn't going to let someone like Bradley destroy it without a fight. I barely slept that night, replaying every moment of the disastrous meeting in vivid detail. By 5 a.m, I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, documenting everything I could remember about Bradley's behavior and comments. If this situation was going to escalate, I needed to be prepared with detailed records. Emma found me there when she woke up for school, surrounded by notebooks and printouts from my research the night before. "Mom, are you okay?" she asked. Her young face creased with worry. I had always tried to shield her from work stress, but children have an uncanny ability to sense when something is seriously wrong. "Just working through some challenges at the office, sweetheart," I told her, managing what I hoped was a reassuring smile. "Nothing for you to worry about." But as I dropped Emma off at school and drove to the office, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to get much worse. My intuition proved correct when I arrived at Meridian to find an email from Bradley waiting in my inbox, sent at 6:30 that morning to the entire account management team. The subject line read, "Organizational Restructuring for Enhanced Client Service." The message was professionally worded corporate speak, but the meaning was crystal clear. Effective immediately, I was being transitioned to a client support specialist role to better utilize my administrative strengths. All strategic client communications would now flow directly through Bradley's office, and my access to high-level planning meetings was being streamlined for efficiency. I read the email 3 times each pass, making me angrier than the last. Bradley was systematically dismantling my position while making it sound like a promotion. The language was carefully crafted to avoid any obvious signs of discrimination, but the intent was unmistakable. He was reducing me from senior account director to glorified secretary. Before I could respond to the email, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Hartwell Industries, and I answered immediately, hoping it was Jonathan with questions about our presentation from the day before. "Annalee, thank goodness I reached you directly." Jonathan's voice carried an edge of frustration that I had never heard before. "I just received a call from your new VP about scheduling a follow-up meeting. He insisted that you wouldn't be attending because you're no longer handling strategic discussions." My stomach dropped. "I'm sorry, Jonathan. There have been some internal changes that I wasn't fully briefed on." "Changes?" His tone grew sharper. "Annalee, you've been my primary contact for 6 years. You understand our business better than anyone else at your company. I specifically requested that you be included in all future discussions. I understand your concerns and I share them," I said carefully, aware that anything I said could be used against me later. "Perhaps we should schedule a 3-way call to clarify everyone's expectations." "No," Jonathan said firmly. "I want to meet with you alone first. Can you come to our offices this afternoon? I think we need to have an honest conversation about what's really happening here." After confirming the meeting time, I hung up and immediately called Sarah Chen, our HR director. Sarah had always been supportive of my career development, and I hoped she would help me navigate this increasingly complicated situation. "I was wondering when you'd call," Sarah said when I reached her office. "I received a copy of Bradley's restructuring email this morning." "Sarah, I need to understand what my options are here. I've been with this company for 6 years and my performance reviews have been consistently excellent. I don't understand how I can be demoted without any discussion or explanation." Sarah's expression was sympathetic but cautious. "Annalee, I want to be honest with you. Bradley has been meeting with David Richardson regularly since he started, and they've discussed making changes to improve operational efficiency. Your situation is part of a larger reorganization that's been in planning for several weeks. A reorganization that I wasn't informed about, even though it directly affects my position and responsibilities. The decision was made to implement changes quickly to minimize disruption to client services." I stared at Sarah, realizing that she was delivering carefully rehearsed corporate messaging rather than giving me genuine guidance. "So you're telling me that the company has already decided to demote me, and this meeting is just a formality?" "I'm telling you that Meridian Marketing values your contributions and wants to find the best way to utilize your skills moving forward. Your new role will still be essential to our client success." Essential. Administrative. Support specialist. The euphemisms were piling up, but they all meant the same thing. I was being pushed out and HR was already in full damage control mode. That afternoon, I drove to Hartwell Industries headquarters, feeling like I was walking into a minefield. Jonathan's assistant escorted me to his corner office where I had spent countless hours over the years discussing strategy and building the partnership that had become the foundation of both our company's success. "Close the door," Jonathan said as soon as I entered. His usually warm demeanor was replaced by serious concern. "Annalee, I need you to tell me what's really happening at Meridian. That meeting yesterday was unlike anything I've experienced with your company." I chose my words carefully, knowing that anything I said could have serious implications for both my career and Meridian's relationship with our most important client. "We're going through some leadership changes that are still being finalized. Leadership changes that involve diminishing the role of the person who built this partnership from the ground up." Jonathan leaned back in his chair, studying my face. "I've been in business for 25 years, Annalee. I know what reorganization looks like, and I know what power plays look like. This feels like the latter. I can't speak to the motivations behind the decisions being made, I said honestly, but I can assure you that my commitment to supporting Hartwell Industries hasn't changed. Jonathan was quiet for a long moment, then reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a folder. I want you to see something, he said, sliding the folder across his desk. Yesterday evening, I received a phone call from someone claiming to represent a competing marketing firm in Chicago. They offered to provide detailed information about Meridian's strategies for our account, including confidential information that only someone with high-level access could possess. My blood ran cold as I opened the folder and saw printed emails and phone logs documenting the conversation. The competing firm was Bradley's previous employer, and the call had come just hours after our disastrous meeting. Jonathan, I had no knowledge of this. I know you didn't, he said firmly, but someone at your company is sharing confidential information with our competitors. And the timing of that call, combined with what happened in yesterday's meeting, suggests that your new VP might not have Meridian's best interests at heart. As I drove back to the office with copies of Jonathan's documentation, my mind was racing with the implications of what I had learned. Bradley wasn't just trying to push me out of my position. He was actively working to undermine Meridian Marketing's relationship with our most valuable client, potentially for the benefit of his former employer. The situation had escalated far beyond a simple workplace conflict. If Bradley was sharing confidential client information with competitors, he was committing corporate espionage that could destroy not just my career, but the entire company that I had dedicated years of my life to building. That evening, I called Marcus Thompson, a fellow account director who had become a trusted friend over the years. Marcus managed several of our mid-tier clients and had always been someone I could count on for honest advice and support. I've been waiting for your call, Marcus said as soon as he heard my voice. The whole office is talking about what happened yesterday. People are shocked by how Bradley treated you in front of Hartwell. Marcus, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Have you noticed anything unusual about Bradley's behavior with his other clients? There was a pause before Marcus answered. Actually, yes. He's been asking a lot of detailed questions about client strategies and internal processes, more than someone in his position would normally need to know. And he's been scheduling private meetings with several major clients without including their account managers. Have any of those clients mentioned receiving offers from competing firms? Now that you mention it, 2 of my clients have asked me about rumors they've heard regarding our company's stability. They wanted reassurance that we weren't planning any major changes that would affect their service. The pattern was becoming unmistakable. Bradley wasn't just targeting me personally. He was systematically gathering intelligence about Meridian's client relationships and potentially sharing that information with outside parties. The implications were staggering both legally and financially. As I tucked Emma into bed that night, I made a decision that would change the course of everything that followed. I wasn't going to accept being marginalized or pushed out without fighting back. But I also wasn't going to let Bradley destroy the company and client relationships that so many good people depended on for their livelihoods. I was going to expose him for what he was, and I was going to do it before he could cause any more damage. The next morning, I arrived at the office early, determined to gather concrete evidence of Bradley's suspicious activities before he could cover his tracks. My access to client files hadn't been revoked yet, giving me a narrow window to investigate the scope of his information sharing. What I discovered in the next 2 hours shook me to my core. Using my administrative access to our client management system, I began reviewing recent activity logs for accounts that Bradley had been discussing in his private meetings. The pattern that emerged was both systematic and damning. Over the past 3 weeks, someone had been downloading comprehensive client profiles, including confidential strategic plans, financial projections, and competitive analysis reports. The downloads had all occurred outside normal business hours, and they covered our 7 largest accounts, representing over $1 billion in combined annual billing. Most troubling of all, the access logs showed that these downloads had happened on evenings when Bradley had been working late, supposedly familiarizing himself with our client portfolio. I printed the logs and secured them in a locked drawer, then began cross-referencing the dates with other activities I could track. Bradley's private client meetings had all occurred within 48 hours of these data downloads, suggesting a deliberate pattern of gathering intelligence before meeting with account holders. As I was reviewing the evidence, my phone rang with a call that would provide the missing piece of the puzzle I was building. Emma's school nurse was calling to inform me that my daughter had developed a high fever and needed to be picked up immediately. The timing couldn't have been worse, but Emma's health was always my first priority. I gathered my research materials and drove to the school, where I found my daughter pale and lethargic in the nurse's office. After taking her to our pediatrician, I learned that she had developed a severe throat infection that would require expensive antibiotic treatment, not fully covered by our insurance plan. Sitting in the pharmacy while waiting for Emma's prescription, I called my mother to ask if she could help with childcare while Emma recovered. The conversation that followed added another layer of stress to my already overwhelming situation. "Annalie, I'm glad you called," my mother said, her voice strained. "I just got back from Dr. Martinez's office and we need to talk. The tests came back and I'm going to need surgery sooner than we hoped." My mother had been battling a chronic condition for months, and we had known that surgery might be necessary eventually, but the timing felt like another devastating blow to our family's stability. "What kind of timeline are we looking at, Mom?" "Dr. Martinez wants to schedule it for next week. The procedure itself is covered by Medicare, but the rehabilitation and follow-up care are going to be expensive. I know you're dealing with your own challenges right now, but I might need some financial help." As I processed this news while watching Emma sleep fitfully in her car seat, the full weight of my situation became clear. I was facing potential job loss at exactly the moment when my family needed financial stability more than ever. The health challenges affecting both my daughter and my mother would require resources that I might not have if Bradley succeeded in forcing me out of my position. That evening, after settling Emma at home with medication and soup, I received a phone call that would prove to be the turning point in my fight against Bradley's sabotage. "Annalie, this is Jonathan Hartwell. I hope I'm not calling too late." "Not at all, Jonathan. How can I help you?" "I wanted you to know that I received another contact from that Chicago firm I mentioned yesterday. This time they were much more specific about the information they claimed to have about our account with Meridian." My heart rate increased as Jonathan continued. "They knew details about our upcoming product launch that we've only shared with you and your team. They also had accurate financial projections that match the numbers in your quarterly report exactly." "Jonathan, I can assure you that I have never shared any confidential information about your business with anyone outside of Meridian." "I believe you completely," he said. "But someone with access to that information is sharing it with your competitors. And I have to tell you, this firm has offered to match our current contract terms while providing what they call enhanced strategic insights based on their inside knowledge of our business relationship with Meridian." The implications hit me like a physical blow. Bradley wasn't just trying to push me out of my position. He was actively working to steal our clients for his former employer, using confidential information as leverage to secure new business for his previous company. "Jonathan, I need to ask you a favor, and I understand if you can't agree to it. Would you be willing to document these contacts and provide me with copies of any communications you've received? I believe what's happening here goes far beyond normal business competition." "I've already started keeping records," Jonathan said. "And I want you to know that regardless of what's happening internally at Meridian Hartwell Industries, values our relationship with you personally. If circumstances change with your employment situation, I hope you'll consider discussing other ways we might work together." After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen staring at the evidence I had gathered over the past 2 days. Client access logs documented contact from competitors, suspicious downloading patterns, and now direct confirmation that confidential information was being shared with Bradley's former employer. I had uncovered what appeared to be a systematic corporate espionage operation designed to steal Meridian's largest clients while destroying the careers of the account managers who had built those relationships. The scope of the betrayal was breathtaking, both in its audacity and in its potential impact on everyone who worked at our company. But I also realized that I was in an incredibly vulnerable position. Bradley held a senior leadership role and had the backing of our CEO. I was a single employee making serious accusations against someone with significantly more organizational power. If I was going to expose his activities, I needed to be absolutely certain that my evidence was irrefutable and that I had support from people who couldn't be easily dismissed or silenced. The next morning brought news that would accelerate my timeline for action. I arrived at the office to find an email from Bradley announcing an emergency board meeting scheduled for the following Monday. The agenda included a comprehensive review of account management efficiency and proposed restructuring to improve client service delivery. Reading between the lines, I realized that Bradley was preparing to present his plan for eliminating my position and potentially those of other senior account managers. He was going to consolidate control over our major clients under his direct supervision, giving him unrestricted access to the confidential information he needed to complete his systematic betrayal of Meridian marketing. I had less than a week to build a case strong enough to expose Bradley's espionage operation and save not just my own career, but the livelihoods of everyone who would be affected by his destructive plan. As I began making a list of people I could trust to help me gather additional evidence, one thing became absolutely clear. I wasn't fighting just for myself anymore. I was fighting for the integrity of the company I had helped build and for the protection of the client relationships that so many dedicated professionals had worked years to develop. Bradley had made a critical mistake in underestimating my determination and my understanding of how our business really operated. He was about to learn that destroying someone's career and betraying their life's work comes with consequences he hadn't anticipated. I spent the weekend building what I hoped would be an unassailable case against Bradley's corporate espionage operation. Emma was recovering well from her throat infection, giving me the mental space I needed to focus on gathering additional evidence and identifying allies who could help expose the truth. On Saturday morning, I met Jonathan Hartwell at a small coffee shop 30 miles outside the city, far from any location where we might accidentally encounter other Meridian employees. Jonathan had agreed to share everything he had documented about the suspicious contacts from Bradley's former employer, and what he revealed exceeded my worst expectations. The first call came just 2 hours after that disastrous meeting on Tuesday, Jonathan explained, sliding a folder across the table. They knew specific details about our conversation regarding the Southeast expansion project, including cost projections and timeline estimates that you and I had only discussed privately. I reviewed the documents Jonathan had prepared, including detailed notes about 3 separate contacts from the Chicago firm. Each communication had included increasingly specific information about Hartwell Industries' business relationship with Meridian, culminating in a formal proposal that offered to replicate our current services, while providing what they called strategic advantages based on comprehensive market intelligence. Jonathan, this isn't just business competition. This is industrial espionage. Someone with high-level access to our client files is systematically stealing confidential information and sharing it with competitors. I reached out to 2 other CEOs whose companies work with Meridian, Jonathan continued. Both of them have received similar contacts in the past month. Michael Peterson at Steinberg Manufacturing and Linda Rodriguez at Coastal Distribution both confirmed that competing firms had approached them with inside information about their accounts. The scope of Bradley's operation was even larger than I had initially realized. He wasn't just targeting Hartwell Industries. He was systematically gathering intelligence about multiple major clients and sharing that information with outside firms, potentially in exchange for future employment opportunities or direct financial compensation. "There's something else you need to know," Jonathan said, lowering his voice. "The Chicago firm that's been contacting us specifically mentioned that they have someone with current access to Meridian's internal systems. They've offered to provide real-time updates about any changes to our account management or strategic planning." My blood ran cold as the full implications became clear. Bradley wasn't just stealing historical information. He was offering to provide ongoing intelligence about Meridian's operations, turning him into a permanent spy within our company. That afternoon, I contacted Rachel Martinez, an employment attorney who had been recommended by a colleague from my graduate program. Rachel specialized in corporate misconduct cases and had experience dealing with situations involving breach of fiduciary duty and trade secret theft. "Based on what you've described, you're dealing with potential violations of multiple federal laws," Rachel explained during our consultation. "Corporate espionage, breach of fiduciary duty, and conspiracy to defraud are all serious criminal offenses, but you'll need more than circumstantial evidence to prove your case." "What kind of evidence would be sufficient?" "Direct communications showing coordination with outside parties, documented transfers of confidential information, or recorded conversations acknowledging the illegal activity. The challenge is gathering that evidence without putting yourself at legal risk." Rachel provided me with detailed guidance about documenting workplace misconduct while protecting myself from retaliation claims. She also explained the legal protections available to whistleblowers who report corporate crimes, including potential financial compensation if my information led to successful prosecution. Sunday evening, I received an unexpected phone call that would provide the final piece of evidence I needed to build my case. Marcus Thompson was calling from home, his voice tense with urgency. "Annalee, I need to tell you something, but I'm not sure how to say this without sounding paranoid. Just tell me what's happening, Marcus." I was working late on Friday, finishing up reports for Monday's meetings. Around 9 o'clock, I heard voices coming from Bradley's office, so I walked over to see if he needed any help with anything. His door was closed, but I could hear him talking on the phone. Marcus paused, and I could hear him taking a deep breath before continuing. He was discussing specific client information with someone providing details about account values and strategic plans, but the conversation didn't sound like normal business discussion. He was talking about timing and coordination like he was planning something with whoever was on the other end of the call. "Did you hear any specific details?" "He mentioned your name several times, and he said something about clearing the way for full access after Monday's board meeting. Then he talked about documentation that would be available for final review before the end of the month." The timeline Marcus described aligned perfectly with Bradley's announcement about the emergency board meeting and the broader pattern of espionage I had uncovered. He was preparing to eliminate me and other senior account managers so that he could have unrestricted access to client information for his final data transfer. "Marcus, I need you to know that what you overheard is part of a much larger pattern of illegal activity. Bradley has been systematically stealing client information and sharing it with his former employer in Chicago." "I was afraid of something like that," Marcus said. "Some of the questions he's been asking have felt invasive and unnecessary, and several clients have mentioned receiving unusual contacts from competing firms." After explaining the evidence I had gathered and the legal implications of Bradley's actions, I asked Marcus if he would be willing to provide a formal statement about what he had witnessed. His agreement to support my case gave me the additional credibility I needed to approach senior leadership with confidence. That night, I created a comprehensive presentation documenting Bradley's espionage operation, including timeline analysis, evidence of unauthorized data access, client confirmations of suspicious competitor contacts, and witness statements from Marcus and Jonathan. The case I had built was thorough, well-documented, and legally sound, but I also realized that presenting this information through normal channels might give Bradley an opportunity to destroy evidence or accelerate his timeline for stealing client information. I needed to find a way to expose his activities before he could complete his mission and disappear with the confidential data he had been systematically collecting. As I prepared for what I knew would be the most important confrontation of my career, I thought about the conversation I had with Emma earlier that evening. She had asked me why I seemed worried lately, and I had tried to explain the concept of standing up to bullies in age-appropriate terms. Sometimes grown-ups have to fight against people who are doing bad things, I had told her. It's scary and difficult, but it's important to protect other people who might get hurt. Are you fighting against a bad person at work? Emma had asked with the direct honesty that children possess. Yes, sweetheart, and I'm going to make sure that good people don't get hurt by what this bad person is trying to do. As I reviewed my evidence one final time before the confrontation that would determine the future of my career and the integrity of the company I loved, I felt a sense of calm determination settling over me. Bradley had underestimated my intelligence, my dedication, and my willingness to fight for what was right. He was about to learn that destroying someone's life's work comes with consequences that he hadn't anticipated. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. Bradley's emergency board meeting was scheduled for 10 o'clock, and I knew this would be my only opportunity to expose his espionage operation before he could complete his systematic destruction of Meridian Marketing's client relationships. I arrived at the office early, carrying a leather portfolio containing every piece of evidence I had gathered over the past week. Timeline analyses, access logs, client testimonials, witness statements, and documented proof of corporate espionage that could send Bradley to federal prison if properly prosecuted. At 9:45, I walked into the boardroom where Bradley was already seated with CEO David Richardson and the other senior partners. The agenda on the table confirmed my worst fears. Bradley was preparing to present a comprehensive restructuring plan that would eliminate my position and consolidate all major client relationships under his direct control. "Annalee," David Richardson said with surprise, "I don't believe you were invited to this meeting." "I wasn't," I replied, maintaining steady eye contact with Bradley, whose confident expression had shifted to one of barely concealed alarm. "But I have information that's directly relevant to the restructuring being discussed today." Bradley stood up quickly. "David, I think there's been a misunderstanding. This is a strategic planning session for senior leadership. We can address any concerns Annalee has through appropriate channels later." "Actually," I said, placing my portfolio on the conference table, "I think the board needs to understand exactly why this restructuring is being proposed and who benefits from eliminating experienced account managers." David Richardson looked between Bradley and me, clearly uncertain about how to proceed. "Annalee, if you have concerns about organizational changes, HR would be the appropriate venue for discussion. Sir, with respect, HR can't address federal crimes, but the FBI can." The room fell completely silent. Bradley's face had gone pale, and I could see his mind racing as he tried to figure out how much I knew about his activities. "That's an extremely serious accusation," David said slowly. "I think you need to explain exactly what you're talking about." I opened my portfolio and began distributing copies of the evidence I had compiled. Over the past 3 weeks, someone with high-level access to our client management system has been downloading comprehensive files for our 7 largest accounts, representing over $1 billion in annual billing. As the board members reviewed the access logs and timeline analysis, I continued my presentation. These downloads occurred outside normal business hours and were followed within 48 hours by private meetings with the affected clients. During this same period, multiple clients received contacts from competing firms offering services based on detailed inside knowledge of their business relationships with Meridian. Bradley attempted to interrupt. These are wild accusations without any factual basis. I've been working late to familiarize myself with our client portfolio, which is exactly what anyone in my position would do. Then perhaps you can explain this, I said, distributing copies of Jonathan Hartwell's documentation, direct evidence of a competing firm offering to replicate our services while providing strategic advantages based on what they described as comprehensive market intelligence. I watched as David Richardson and the other board members read through Jonathan's detailed notes, their expressions growing increasingly grave as they absorbed the implications of what they were seeing. The firm making these offers is Bradley's previous employer in Chicago, I continued. They've provided specific details about client strategies and financial projections that could only have come from someone with current access to our confidential files. At that moment, the conference room door opened and Jonathan Hartwell walked in, accompanied by a man I didn't recognize. I hope I'm not interrupting, Jonathan said, his voice carrying an edge of controlled anger. But I believe I can provide additional context for this discussion. Bradley jumped to his feet. Jonathan, there's been a serious misunderstanding. We weren't expecting you today. No, I'm sure you weren't, Jonathan replied. David, I think you should know that Hartwell Industries has been documenting systematic attempts by competing firms to steal confidential information about our business relationship with Meridian. This gentleman is Robert Chen from our legal department. Robert Chen stepped forward and placed a thick folder on the conference table. We've been investigating these contacts for the past week, and we've discovered evidence of what appears to be organized corporate espionage targeting multiple Meridian clients. As Robert Chen presented Hartwell's independent investigation, the scope of Bradley's operation became undeniably clear. The documentation showed coordinated efforts to steal client information from at least 5 major accounts, with detailed timelines that matched exactly with Bradley's activities at Meridian. There's something else, Jonathan continued. We've been working with other affected clients, and we're prepared to file formal complaints with federal authorities if this information theft continues. Bradley's composure finally cracked completely. This is all circumstantial nonsense. You can't prove that I've done anything wrong. Actually, we can, I said, pulling out the final piece of evidence I had been saving. Marcus Thompson overheard your phone conversation on Friday evening where you discussed timing and coordination with someone about providing final documentation after today's board meeting. Marcus Thompson appeared in the doorway, having been waiting outside for my signal. I'm prepared to provide a formal statement about what I witnessed, he said quietly. The room erupted as board members began asking urgent questions, and Bradley frantically tried to deny the mounting evidence against him. But the documentation was overwhelming, and the coordination between multiple independent sources made his guilt undeniable. David Richardson called for security as the board voted unanimously to terminate Bradley's employment effective immediately, but I wasn't finished yet. David, before this meeting concludes, I have a proposal that I think deserves consideration. The room quieted as everyone turned their attention back to me. Rather than simply returning to the previous organizational structure, I'd like to suggest an alternative approach that could strengthen our client relationships while protecting against future security breaches. I took a deep breath and presented the idea that had been forming in my mind throughout this ordeal. I'm proposing the creation of an independent client relationship management division within Meridian Marketing, a specialized unit focused exclusively on maintaining and developing our most valuable partnerships with enhanced security protocols and direct accountability to this board. Jonathan Hartwell smiled for the first time since entering the room. That's exactly the kind of innovative thinking that made our partnership so successful in the first place. As security escorted Bradley from the building and the board members began discussing the implications of what they had learned, I felt a profound sense of vindication mixed with exhaustion. The confrontation I had been dreading for weeks was finally over, and the truth had prevailed despite Bradley's attempts to destroy everything I had worked to build. But more importantly, I had protected not just my own career, but the livelihoods of everyone at Meridian who depended on honest, ethical business practices for their professional security. The fight was over, but the real work of rebuilding and moving forward was just beginning. The week following Bradley's termination was a whirlwind of meetings, legal consultations, and strategic planning sessions that would reshape not just my career, but the entire structure of how Meridian Marketing approached client relationships. David Richardson had initially offered me Bradley's former position as VP, but I had a different vision for my future. Instead of simply stepping into the traditional corporate hierarchy, I wanted to create something new that would prevent the kind of systematic betrayal we had just uncovered. "I appreciate the offer, David," I explained during our private meeting on Wednesday morning, "but I think Meridian needs something more innovative than just replacing one VP with another." The client relationship management division I proposed would operate as a semi-autonomous unit within the company with its own protocols and accountability measures. The concept I presented was radical by traditional agency standards. Rather than having account managers report through multiple layers of corporate bureaucracy, the new division would function as a specialized consulting firm housed within Meridian's broader structure. Account directors would have direct equity stakes in the success of their client relationships, creating incentives for long-term partnership development rather than short-term revenue extraction. "It's an interesting model," David said thoughtfully, "but it would require significant changes to our existing organizational structure. Changes that would protect against future security breaches and corporate espionage," I pointed out. "The traditional model assumes that senior leadership has the company's best interests at heart. Recent events have shown how vulnerable that assumption can be." Jonathan Hartwell had agreed to serve as the anchor client for the new division, providing both financial backing and strategic guidance for its development. His support carried enormous weight with Meridian's board, particularly given the evidence of how our traditional structure had failed to protect his confidential information. Hartwell Industries has already committed to a 5-year partnership agreement with enhanced terms, Jonathan explained during Thursday's presentation to the full board. "But our continued relationship depends on implementation of security protocols that prevent unauthorized access to confidential client data." The financial implications were compelling. Under the new structure, the client relationship management division would generate higher profit margins while providing better service to major accounts. Account directors would be rewarded for building sustainable partnerships rather than simply meeting short-term billing targets. By Friday, we had approval for a pilot program that would begin with our 5 largest clients, including Hartwell Industries. I would serve as the founding director of the new division with Marcus Thompson and 2 other senior account managers joining as equity partners. The legal framework was complex but exciting. Rachel Martinez had agreed to serve as general counsel for the expanding operation, bringing her expertise in corporate law and regulatory compliance to ensure that our innovative structure met all legal requirements. But the most satisfying aspect of the new arrangement was the opportunity to mentor other professionals who might face similar challenges in the future. The division would include a comprehensive ethics training program and clear protocols for reporting suspicious behavior or potential conflicts of interest. "We're not just building a better business model," I explained to Emma over dinner on Friday evening. "We're creating a place where good people can do meaningful work without worrying about being undermined or betrayed by their colleagues." Emma had been following my work situation with the intense curiosity that 8-year-olds bring to adult problems they're trying to understand. "So the bad person is gone, and now you get to be in charge of making sure other bad people can't hurt the good people," Something like that, sweetheart. Sometimes when terrible things happen, they create opportunities to build something better than what existed before. The weekend brought news that validated our decision to pursue criminal charges against Bradley. Federal investigators had executed search warrants on his personal devices and discovered extensive evidence of the espionage operation I had uncovered. The scope of his activities extended far beyond what we had initially realized. According to the FBI agents who interviewed me on Saturday morning, Bradley had been systematically stealing client information from multiple companies over a period of several years. Meridian Marketing was just his most recent target in a pattern of corporate espionage that had damaged dozens of businesses and hundreds of individual careers. Your documentation was instrumental in building our case, Agent Thompson explained. The timeline analysis and coordination of evidence from multiple sources provided exactly what we needed to establish the scope of criminal activity. The personal implications were equally important. Emma's medical expenses were covered by the signing bonus from my new position, and my mother's surgery could be scheduled at one of the region's top medical facilities. The financial security I had feared losing was now stronger than ever, built on a foundation of ethical business practices rather than vulnerable corporate politics. On Sunday, I received calls from several industry colleagues who had heard about the FBI investigation and wanted to share their own experiences with suspicious competitor contacts. The pattern that emerged suggested that Bradley's espionage network had been operating on a much larger scale than anyone had initially suspected, but perhaps the most meaningful validation came from an unexpected source. Patricia, my former mentor, who had retired 3 months earlier, called to congratulate me on the successful resolution of what she described as the most significant ethics challenge our industry has faced in decades. I always knew you had the intelligence and dedication to succeed, Patricia told me. But watching you stand up to systematic corruption while protecting everyone around you has shown me that you have something even more valuable: unshakable integrity. As I prepared for the launch of our new division on Monday morning, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point. 6 weeks earlier, I had been a senior account director focused primarily on managing client relationships and building my own career within traditional corporate structures. Now I was pioneering an innovative business model that could transform how marketing agencies approach client partnerships while providing protections against the kind of corporate espionage that had nearly destroyed everything I had worked to build. The transformation hadn't been easy, and there were moments during the past month when I had seriously doubted whether I could succeed against someone with Bradley's institutional power and willingness to use illegal tactics. But the support of ethical colleagues like Marcus Thompson and Jonathan Hartwell had provided the foundation I needed to fight back effectively. More importantly, the experience had taught me that building something meaningful requires more than just individual success. It requires creating systems and relationships that protect everyone who contributes to shared goals, ensuring that good work is rewarded and destructive behavior is stopped before it can cause widespread damage. As I looked ahead to the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction knowing that we had not just survived Bradley's attack, but had used it as catalyst for creating something stronger and more ethical than what had existed before. 2 years later, I was standing in the conference room where Bradley had first humiliated me, but the space had been transformed into something I never could have imagined during those dark days when my career seemed to be crumbling around me. The Anna Lee Strategic Partnerships Division had grown from a pilot program with 5 clients into a thriving operation managing 15 major accounts worth over $2 billion in combined annual billing. The innovative structure we had pioneered was being studied by business schools and replicated by agencies across the country. But the professional success was only part of the story. The federal investigation that began with my documentation of Bradley's espionage operation had expanded into a comprehensive prosecution of a corporate intelligence network that had been operating for over a decade. Bradley himself had been sentenced to 8 years in federal prison after pleading guilty to charges of corporate espionage, conspiracy to defraud, and violation of trade secrets laws. His former employer in Chicago had been forced into bankruptcy after paying settlements to over 40 companies that had been victimized by their systematic information theft operation. The civil lawsuit that followed had resulted in a 7-figure settlement for Meridian Marketing, with a portion of those funds being distributed to employees whose careers had been damaged by Bradley's activities. More importantly, the case had led to industry-wide reforms in how marketing agencies protect client confidentiality and prevent unauthorized access to sensitive business information. The Bradley case changed everything about how we think about corporate security, explained Dr. Jennifer Walsh, my former business school professor, who had invited me to speak to her graduate students about ethical leadership. Your willingness to stand up to systematic corruption created legal precedents that are protecting professionals across multiple industries. The speaking engagement at the University of Texas was one of many opportunities I had received to share the lessons learned from confronting corporate espionage. Harvard Business School had published a case study based on our experience, and I was regularly invited to industry conferences to discuss the importance of building ethical safeguards into business operations. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition had come from an unexpected source. The FBI had presented me with a commendation for civilian assistance in corporate crime prevention, acknowledging that my documentation and investigation had been instrumental in uncovering a conspiracy that extended far beyond the initial threat to my own career. Emma, now 10 years old and thriving in a private school that our improved financial situation made possible, had accompanied me to the award ceremony. Watching her beam with pride as federal agents described her mother's courage in fighting corruption was one of the most satisfying moments of my entire career. "I want to be like you when I grow up," she had whispered as we sat in the FBI field office during the presentation. "I want to catch bad people and protect good people." My mother had made a complete recovery from her surgery and was now living comfortably in a retirement community that provided the medical support she needed while maintaining her independence. The financial stress that had seemed overwhelming during the crisis with Bradley had been completely eliminated through the success of our new business model. But the personal relationships that had been strengthened during the crisis proved to be even more valuable than the professional achievements. Marcus Thompson had become not just a business partner, but a close friend whose family regularly joined Emma and me for weekend activities. Jonathan Hartwell had evolved from client to mentor, providing strategic guidance that helped our division expand into new markets. Most surprisingly, I had begun developing a romantic relationship with David Richardson, whose leadership during the crisis had demonstrated integrity and decisiveness that I deeply respected. Our relationship had developed slowly and carefully, with both of us committed to maintaining clear boundaries between personal feelings and professional responsibilities. "You showed me what real leadership looks like," David had told me during a quiet dinner the previous weekend. "Watching you fight for ethical principles, even when it put your own career at risk, changed how I think about my responsibilities as CEO." The ripple effects of our successful confrontation with corporate espionage continued to expand in unexpected ways. Rachel Martinez had leveraged her experience as our general counsel to specialize in whistleblower protection law, representing other professionals who discovered illegal activities in their workplaces. Her practice had grown rapidly as more people found the courage to report corporate crimes. 3 other major clients who had been targeted by Bradley's espionage network had transferred their accounts to our division, attracted by the enhanced security protocols and ethical business practices we had implemented. The waiting list for our services had grown so long that we were planning to expand into additional regional markets. But success hadn't made me forget the vulnerability I had felt during those weeks when everything I had built seemed to be slipping away. The experience had taught me that professional achievements are only meaningful when they're built on foundations of integrity and mutual respect. The most important lesson from this experience, I explained to Dr. Walsh's graduate students, is that standing up for ethical principles isn't just about protecting yourself. It's about protecting everyone who depends on honest, trustworthy business practices for their livelihoods. As I looked around the room at young professionals who would soon be entering the workforce, I thought about Emma and the kind of business environment I wanted her to inherit when she began her own career. Each of you will face moments when you have to choose between what's easy and what's right, I continued. The choice you make in those moments doesn't just affect your own success. It determines what kind of professional culture you're helping to create for everyone who comes after you. The questions that followed were thoughtful and challenging, reflecting genuine concern about how to maintain ethical standards in competitive business environments. These emerging professionals understood that the corporate world could be both rewarding and dangerous, depending on the integrity of the people who shaped it. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed since that horrible morning when Bradley had dismissed me as support staff in front of our most important client. The humiliation I had felt in that moment had been transformed into determination that ultimately led to achievements I never could have imagined. Emma was waiting for me with homework that needed reviewing, and stories about her day at school that reminded me why all the professional success in the world was meaningless compared to the opportunity to raise a daughter who understood the importance of fighting for what's right. "Did you tell them about how you caught the bad man?" she asked as we worked through her math problems. "I told them about how important it is to protect good people from bad people," I replied. "And I told them that sometimes fighting for what's right is scary, but it's always worth it." As I tucked Emma into bed that night, I felt a deep sense of peace and satisfaction that had nothing to do with financial success or professional recognition. I had faced one of the most challenging situations of my life with courage and integrity, and in doing so, I had created something meaningful that would protect other people for years to come. The little girl who had watched me struggle through those difficult weeks was now growing up in a world where she could see that standing up to bullies and fighting for justice wasn't just possible, but necessary. And perhaps most importantly, she was learning that the most valuable victories are the ones that make life better for everyone, not just for ourselves. The journey that began with humiliation in a corporate boardroom had led to the creation of something larger than any individual career or personal ambition. It had led to the understanding that true success means building systems and relationships that protect integrity and reward ethical behavior, ensuring that the next generation inherits a professional world worth participating in. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where standing up for what's right felt impossible, but you knew you had to try anyway? I'd love to hear about your experiences with workplace challenges and how you found the courage to fight for your principles. Please share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more stories about people who chose courage over comfort. Don't forget to share this with someone who might need to hear that fighting for what's right is always worth it, even when the odds seem overwhelming. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your integrity is the one thing that no one can ever take away from you, no matter how hard they try.